Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. I'm your host, Jay Acharya, and this is the Becoming the Leader in You podcast. In every episode, I'll be talking to guests about their leadership stories, both personal and professional, and stories of their inspirations, their successes, and of course, any challenges and how they overcame them. Before we get started, however, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. And as well as being on YouTube, you can also listen to us on Apple, Amazon, Spotify, and other podcast stations. My guest today has spent over 20 years helping organizations survive change without everyone hiding behind spreadsheets and buzzwords. He's worked across tech, finance, telecoms, retail, and the public sector, helping leaders build high performing teams, strong cultures, and real accountability. Known for his practical and human approach, he also specializes in leadership development, behavioral change, and compassionate leadership, proving that performance and people skills can actually exist in the same sentence. I'd like to please welcome James Hudson. James, how are you?
I am very well, thank you, Jay. Thank you so much for inviting me on the podcast. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're most welcome. It's always appreciated. And, the podcast's been going really well, and it's fantastic to have people like yourself coming on to talk about your experiences, the successes, the challenges you've had, and to talk from a trainer's perspective as to how they work and deal with clients, but also how you overcome those challenges that you also face with those clients. So, in order to get started, I know I've done a small introduction, but let
Mhm.
the viewers and listeners know a bit more about who you are, James.
Cool. Yeah. I started out my career, seems like a very, very long time ago, but in the mid 1990s, working in the mobile telecom sector. It was a very fast-moving, exciting time to be involved in that sector. I started out in sales.
Mhm.
Very quickly became a sales manager.
Yeah.
Had quite a successful sales career. Um, I then moved across into the world of training and learning and development,
Uh-huh.
which I can still remember the first time I kind of stood in front of a room of people and delivered some training, and just that feeling inside my soul that this is where I belong. This is this
Yeah.
is this is the place for me.
Did you have the
Um,
butterflies in the belly?
oh, absolutely, yeah,
Oh,
the
wonderful.
nerves and everything. But then when you push through those nerves and you see, for me, that the light bulb on someone's face, as
Mm.
suddenly they get something and they've understood it, that for me is the most rewarding thing. And so once I'd had that, it was like I just have to do this for the rest of my career. So
Wonderful.
so I moved into learning and development. Also in my career, I moved across into the world of banking and financial services. So
Uh-huh.
I worked with Barclays, HSBC, a number of the very big banks. And then about 13 years ago, I decided that I was going to go out on my own,
Right.
and do my own consultancy. So I'd kind of always told people, one of these days I'm going to do this. I can run a business, all this kind of stuff. And
Yeah,
then
yeah.
eventually some of my colleagues said, are you actually ever going to do this? Or are you always going to, talk about it and never do it? So I took the brave move, stepped out on my own, and started to work as a freelance consultant,
Uh-huh.
working mainly in the leadership development
Excellent.
space, um, and worked with all kinds of different clients, and my work takes me globally. Lots of different sectors, from tech,
Mm.
from financial services, utilities, oil, energy, all kinds of different
Yeah.
places around the globe. And what I have learned over the course of my career is um, compassionate leadership and
Uh-huh.
human-based leadership
Yeah.
delivers sustainable long-term change. I do a lot of work in leadership, a lot of work in change and transformation, um, and actually, take you right back, if I may, Jay, to when I first started out as a sales manager.
Uh-huh.
I always tell people I made every mistake you can possibly make as a young manager, a young leader.
That's the best way
Um,
to learn, though.
Absolutely. But honestly, there are many things that I said and did in those times that I regret massively. But I was a young man making my way as a young manager. Um, but what it did do, making all those mistakes, was made me start to realize, well, actually, what makes a great leader?
Mm.
And why do some leaders manage to inspire, bring about
Yeah.
change? Um, and motivate people, and then other leaders, they might get short-term success, but
Absolutely. Yeah,
later that kind of dies away and all that kind of stuff.
it does.
That's what really formed the basis of me kind of understand leadership, and as I say, to
Okay.
where I am today around compassionate leadership,
Yeah. That's
understanding that. Sorry, yeah.
no, no, that's great to know. And
Mm,
we'll be delving into those sort of
mm,
experiences as we go through the conversation. Um, and as ever, this podcast obviously is called Becoming the Leader in You. And my first question for all my guests is always about what does that mean to you personally, becoming the leader in you?
yeah, and I think, yeah, it has been an absolute journey for me, as I say, over the last sort of nearly 3 decades now that I've
Uh-huh.
worked in leadership. And I think, if you went back and asked the younger me what leadership was about, it was
Uh-huh.
about achievements and hitting goals and success and all this kind of
Mm,
stuff. Whereas actually, I think what I've grown to understand is actually success and all these great things. What it is about alignment and self-awareness
yeah.
and becoming more um, sustainable
Mhm.
motivation and intrinsic motivation as opposed to external motivation.
Yeah.
um, and for me, there are really two types of leadership, and most leadership that we see in corporate worlds is what I would describe as fear-based leadership.
Yes.
Command and control, carrot and stick,
Mhm.
do this or else, do
Yeah.
this or you'll get this. Whereas compassionate leadership is the complete opposite. It is
Mhm.
very much around humanity, kindness, not niceness, kindness,
Yeah.
and helping people um, to transform and change, um, from an intrinsic motivational
Sure.
point of view,
And
as opposed to external force.
do you feel that over the past, let's just say 5, 10 years, leadership styles have changed into becoming more compassionate as opposed to being almost that dictatorial style that we used to have 40 years ago, 50 years ago?
I definitely think that we're seeing a lot more of it out there.
Hmm.
I do think, though, sometimes if you look at the world stage, perhaps without naming names or anything like
Yeah.
that, we have quite a few world leaders at the moment that I don't think compassion is particularly high on their agenda.
No.
Um, but I think certainly within the corporate world, I'm seeing more and more people kind of
Mhm.
looking at, actually, how do I build sustainable success? It comes from
Sure.
creating psychological safety. It comes from creating a space where people can bring their best selves to work and they feel
Of
safe
course.
to bring their best selves to work. And I do think, there are some leaders on the world stage who do prioritize people above
Mm,
profits.
yeah.
So yeah, it's in answer to your question, to be really, really vague, it's a
Mhm.
mixed bag.
No, and that's perfect because I think it would be a boring world if we had all the same styles of leaders.
Mhm.
And to have that mixed bag definitely does make it interesting when we're out there working with these individuals within their different industry sectors. Um, so you say you've been doing this for almost 3 decades. I'm hitting my end of the fourth decade in leadership. So I have also seen a lot of changes as well. And I've had individuals who have inspired me to do what I am doing. So, to ask you the question, who would you say has been your inspiration to make you the person that you are today?
I think I've been really, really blessed that I've had a lot of inspirations over the years. I've had a lot of bad inspirations as well, and a lot
Okay.
of things that have made me who I am, or I've learned from to not be like as
Okay.
well.
Give me an example of one of the bad inspirations.
Um, So very much fear-based kind of leadership, very
Right.
much dictatorial, very much micromanagement.
Mhm.
You will do it my way or the highway, or very, very much nitpicking over things. And these styles of management, they don't work. As I say, they might give you some short-term
Mm.
success. Threatening someone to say, if you don't do this, you will lose your job.
Yeah.
They will begin to perform, but ultimately, you've lost the person at that
Yeah.
point.
Because they're
And
performing under the fear of threat of loss of job.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when your back is turned, they will go back to however they were before,
Mhm.
or they will have already taken one step. You know, phrase that we see a lot, quiet quitting. You know,
Yeah,
they've already quit the job. They're
yeah,
already looking elsewhere. Yeah.
absolutely.
So you've lost them already at that
Yeah,
stage.
and I
So
think
so those kind of ways just don't work.
you mentioned the political landscape, and today is one of those political landscapes where we see a lot of that, where we do have that sort of, dare I say, semi-silent exposure of I'm leaving my job because I want to do something else. And we've seen that in in the UK political landscape here at the moment. And whenever we talk about leadership, you can't but bring in the conversation of politics, unfortunately. And when we do look globally, it's amazing how people look at the UK and the West, particularly the UK and the US, for the type of leaders that we have, um, and also from the perspective of industry business. It's we see the UK and the US having more leaders being dissected and observed more than any other country, and
Mm,
that says a lot about who we are within the West and about who are these individuals that are inspirational as well. And it's always I don't know if you've done this in your training sessions, but I always do ask the question: give me two people that have inspired you and why. And
mm.
it's amazing how many people come up with either religious figures or political
Yep.
figures.
Mm,
And on the odd occasion, you'll get a paternal or maternal person. Um, but then sometimes you get people saying, mine's a fictional person. And that makes you realize, well, why is it fictional? And you ask
mm.
the question, they say, because they've got more about them than anyone that we see on the world stage at the moment.
Yeah.
So that does question you. So if I was to ask you that question, then who would be a fictional person that would be an inspiration to
So
you?
I mean, I was going to head towards a non-fictional and someone who has inspired me massively in my career.
Okay,
So
do
I'll
both.
go there
Do both.
first, whilst I think about a fictional one as well. Because I mean, there's many characters as a young boy that I used to enjoy, that probably did shape me. But no, you asked for an inspirational leader that I worked with, and I think one that always, and I go back to often in my training, is Joe Garner at HSBC, who later went on to BT,
Uh-huh.
Nationwide, and a number of other places. And I was really fortunate to work with Joe
Mhm.
when I was in learning and development at HSBC. Um, Joe had a number of things that he did absolutely brilliant. You know, no leader is perfect, but he
Mhm.
always used to say to us, you know, that he was the chief listening officer. That was one that always stuck with me. Yeah, my job is to be the chief listening officer,
Yeah.
and it was so true. And I think great leaders listen, and Joe was a great example of that because he would take time out every single week without fail.
Mm.
He would either be in a call center or a branch,
Mhm.
and he'd be talking to the colleagues, he'd be talking to the staff.
Yeah.
Sorry, he'd be talking to the customers and finding out, you know, from the, you know, the coal face, if you
Yeah.
like, what's going on in my business, what do you like about this business,
Exactly.
what's frustrating you about this business. So he was a great listener. He also just used to create the space where it was never about, you know, you must do this and do this and do
Mm.
this. It was, okay, this is the problem, how are we going to go about solving it,
Yeah.
how are we going to get to where we need to go.
Yeah.
And so it was a very inclusive leadership environment, and one where you felt you could bring your best self, you could bring your
Yeah. Yeah.
ideas, and they weren't going to get poo-pooed or laughed
Mm.
at or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I would say he was one of the major influences in my leadership journey and my
Yeah.
leadership style.
That's great to hear.
Definitely.
And I think that's a really good point that you're making. You know, when you're able to come into that sort of forum where you can pretty much say what you need to find a solution. And sometimes the silliest ideas are the most likely solution. And it's about having the opportunity to be able to say, well, this is what I think. This is what I think will happen. This is what I think the outcome's going to be. What are your thoughts? And only then, you know, after everyone's laughed and giggled or whatever, that someone turns around and says, You're onto something there.
Yeah.
But it's about you say problems, there's problems. I always call them challenges. I always say, don't turn a problem into another problem. Call it a challenge. That way you're easily finding solutions for it.
Mm.
So what about your fictional character then?
Do you know, again, this is it's not something I've really thought about, but I'm just thinking about fictional characters that really inspire me. I mean, as a kid, I was a massive fan of Tintin.
Oh, yes.
Uh, and I think, just
Hergé's
that
Adventures of Tintin.
absolutely, and that curiosity, and I
Mm,
think that's very much been a hallmark of my career is that curiosity and
yeah.
never being scared to be curious, ask the question,
Yeah.
find out, um, and solve problems.
Yes.
Again, solve challenges. You
Mhm.
see it as actually here's something that we need to go away. We need to solve this,
Mm.
and find a solution to it. So yeah, no, I think if you were to ask me of a of a fictional character that really shaped me, possibly Tintin.
No, that's wonderful. And yeah, the fact that you said curiosity, so many of my guests have actually used that phrase and said that that's what has inspired them as well. It's about being allowed to be curious with their clients, curious within their industry sectors, and having those doors opening up because they're asking the right types of questions for those doors to open up for people to be open and transparent about the challenges that they're facing within their own industry sectors as well.
Yeah.
Let me move on to another question for you then,
Mm,
James. It's about your beliefs. And I'm not going down the religious beliefs or faith beliefs or anything, but what's something that you have a strong belief in within leadership, within management and development that your peers or your colleagues or your clients may actually disagree with?
mm. I was going to say beliefs. I came from a very very religious background, so
Mhm,
we won't go there. Um, but in terms of a belief that I think, well, I mean, the the main one being the whole most leadership is fear based,
mhm,
and actually the truly sustainable leadership is compassion based, in my
mhm,
opinion, and is my absolute belief. I think the other one that kind of follows on from that, from my work in change and transformation over the years, is that you can't change people.
mm,
And again, I think that pains a lot of trainers and L&D people because they're like, our job is to bring change and transformation.
yeah.
And I am a massive believer that you can't actually change anyone. They have to change themselves. All you can
Right.
do is create the space and the
Yes.
conditions for change to happen,
Mm,
but you cannot make anybody change. And that's again why a fear-based leadership doesn't work.
yeah.
Because if you fear someone, pressure someone into change,
Uh-huh.
that change is not sustainable.
I'm so glad that you added on that they have to make that change, in the words of Michael Jackson.
Yeah.
Um, but because I was going to say, actually, no, that's our responsibility. Our responsibility is to make them see that if they make those changes themselves, then there's a better place for them to be or a better space to work in. So I'm glad that you added that sort of caveat that they have, because I was about to say, no, I'm going to challenge that. I disagree with what you're saying there, James. Um, but you're so right, because I know so many times I've worked with clients and they're the ones that walk in and say, you're not going to change me. I know what I've been doing for the past 25 years. I've been doing this, doing this. And then you sort of say one word and they go, oh, oh my God,
Mm,
I've been doing this wrong all my life. Now I understand. And it's kind of, well, I've not said anything. You're the one that told me that this is what
yeah.
you could do. But you're absolutely right. So give me an example of a time when you may have had that sort of friction and that stoppage from a client where they don't want to change, but then they've seen or made that space where they've thought and realized, actually, I can see what I need to be doing to improve myself, my team, my department, my company.
Oh wow. I mean, there's countless ones over the course of my career. Like
Mhm.
literally, almost every single client you walk into them, and it's like, we don't like change around here. And I can remember a specific. Again, I'm not going to name any names, but being told, we've done it this way for 25 years, James, and if there was another way to do it, we would have found it by now.
Mm.
Um, and so we do it this way, and this is what we do.
Yeah.
And my response was, well, have you had the results that you were looking for in the last
Mm.
25 years?
Yeah.
And so if it's not giving you the results that you're looking for, and it's not delivering what you need, why do you keep doing the same thing? If you do the
Yeah.
same thing again and again and again, you're not going to get a different outcome. You're going to get
Exactly.
the same outcome. So maybe it's time to look at things from a different way. And
Yeah.
for me, it's not about telling people what to do. Again, this is where so many people get change wrong. They think I can tell people
Mm.
what to do, and I can make someone change by
Yeah.
telling them what to do. But it's about getting them to realize it for themselves and
Absolutely. And
having
that's
that
what they can.
realization.
It's about you being able to empower them to make those decisions. And I love the fact that you said it's not about telling them what to do, but it's about giving them the opportunity to tell you what they can be doing in order
Yeah.
to make those changes. And that's about accountability and empowerment, that if they can make themselves accountable for what they've said, then we can then challenge them if they don't achieve it or don't want to do it, because then we can turn around and say, well, actually, James, you told me that you would be able to do this by doing this, this, and this. We discussed the challenges you might face, but also what the success might look like. So how come you stopped doing what you did? And that makes them accountable. And I think that's really important for the people that you and I work with,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
make them realize they're in a position of authority, but also decision making.
Yeah. And it's about creating that space for psychological safety,
Mm,
because that's where innovation comes from. When people feel
of course.
safe, they feel that they can innovate, they can create. When they don't feel safe, then they close the barriers, they
Mm,
shut up shop. And what, again, going back to that difference between fear-based and compassion-based leadership, fear-based leadership brings up people's defenses,
mm,
and it triggers their autonomous nervous system. So the
sure.
fight, flight,
Yeah.
freeze or fawn,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of within them. And so when people are in that nervous, dysregulated nervous system state,
Mhm.
then they will say whatever they need to say.
Absolutely.
So what fear-based leadership will only get you, either a fight back, well,
Mhm.
I did that because you did this to me, and
Yeah.
fight you, or that kind of run away. I'm going to go and find the next job as fast as I can and
Of
go
course.
somewhere else because I don't
Yeah.
like it here. Or what I've discovered through my own self-awareness, and over the last few years, I've been doing a lot of kind of self-compassion work,
Mm.
the freeze fawn, which we
Mhm.
see a lot of, but we talk less about. Most people talk about fight or flight.
Yeah.
A lot of people's kind of response to that fear is freeze and form, which is basically, I will say nothing.
Mm.
I will just nod my head and go along with you,
Yeah.
because actually I want to people please you. So we see a
Exactly.
lot of that in those kind of manager uh, l- manager employee kind of
Mm.
performance conversations where
Yeah.
people will just nod their head, agree, say yeah, you're right,
Mhm.
because their people pleaser side of them
Exactly.
comes
And
out.
something off the back of that as well is that, what I've encountered is that we again are fortunate in the West that we have policy guidelines, legislation that protect us,
Mm,
in the way that we work with our line managers, with our managers, our teams. But the moment you step outside of the West and you start working with companies outside of the West, you start realizing that actually they don't have the same HR support as we would expect. And those have been some big challenges that I've had to face with my clients when, excuse me, I've spoken to them and realized, well, like you say, it's that fight or flight mechanism, but they don't have that capability, or they're not allowed to do that because of the culture that they're working in. And it means that the culture dictates the business, not the person. And it's a shame, because then you do get a very dictatorial manager who does say, this is my way and it's the only way. And they're not willing to listen to anybody else. And anybody that does challenge it, they're sort of removed from that role or from that business. So my question to you is, have you encountered that with your global travels?
mm.
And if so, how have you managed to deal with that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think you summarize it really, really well, Jay. And I think definitely in my travels around the world and working with global leadership teams, you do get a lot of cultures where it is very dictatorial, hierarchical,
Mm,
very much, you know, we we don't challenge anything from above
Yeah.
because we're not allowed to challenge things from above.
Yeah.
Um, I think how I deal with that is to create a space where we are, I guess, influencing and encouraging people to influence as opposed
Hmm.
to push back. Um, because I'm a massive believer that you don't change people by, criticizing them or criticizing their
Yeah.
culture or saying your culture's all wrong and we do it better in the West or anything like that. All you're going to do is get a whole bunch of pushback. So it is
Yeah.
about creating that space to kind of go, okay, well, if that is the situation, what is in your control? What is
Mm.
in your power?
Hmm.
What can you do? And you might not be able to do
Yeah.
everything that you want to do, but there is always something within your control or something that you can change,
Yeah.
and some way in which you can gain more influence.
Of
You know,
course.
are you influencing the right people as well?
Hmm.
I would say I'm
Yeah.
a massive believer in influencing the influencer, and that's not necessarily the person at the top.
Mm.
Often there are influencers within a business that are maybe not the top person, but they have the top person's ear. And
Yeah.
actually, if you can influence that person, then actually you can get your voice heard,
Exactly.
in other ways.
You say influencer, you can also be a leader without the title. And I think we
100%.
forget about that as well. We forget that there's, like you say, influential people who do have the ears of certain individuals, but it's also being able to be put into a position or a situation rather, where they're able to take the lead, even though they're not the manager or they're not the supervisor or they're not the team leader, but the decisions that they make or put in place could be exactly the right decisions that are needed for that organization or business.
Yeah, 100%. I've had this conversation so many times within sort of middle management
Mm,
training sessions where people will say, well, the senior leadership team won't be happy about that and they won't allow us to do that.
yeah,
And it's kind of like, okay, you're not in charge of that.
yeah,
You are in charge of your team, though.
of
So
course.
let me encourage you to do what you believe is right with
Mm,
your team. And if your team gets the results,
mm,
trust me, that senior leadership team will be knocking on your door and asking you,
of
how did
course.
you do that? What is
That's
it
it.
you're doing differently to
Yeah,
these other teams? And that's how you gain that influence. Um,
exactly. And I think that, that's becoming more of a, as you quite rightly say, that compassionate approach, because people now want to know more about the person, the individual, or the teams, and want to know about what skills that they've got that they can bring to the table. James, I can see that we're coming up to about half an hourish, and I've got one more
mm,
question for you to close off the session, and it's about having honest conversations. I I I work for myself. I don't have a team around me. I have my associates, but then, whenever I'm having a team meeting, I literally just sit there with myself, talking to myself, and that's the way it is. But what's an honest conversation that you need to be having with yourself to take you to the next level of your freelance entrepreneurial leadership journey?
yeah. Um, So, I mean, the honest conversation that I have been having with myself over the last few years, and I continue, and I'm still learning,
Hmm.
is that I don't need to people please. I don't
Right.
need
Okay.
to make everybody happy. So my usual kind of under pressure, James, is to try and carry everyone's burdens. Try
Uh-huh.
and shield my team. Try and do too much. Try and keep everybody
Mhm.
happy. And in doing that, more often than not, you end up making nobody happy, as well as making
Mm.
yourself burning yourself
Mhm.
into the ground. Um, and so my honest conversation that I keep having to have with myself, and for someone who suffers with RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria,
Okay.
it's a difficult one, is
Yeah.
that actually I don't need everybody to like me and I don't need to please everybody.
Mm.
And what I need to do is become more self-aware of who I am, what's important to me, what my
Mhm.
values are,
Right.
um, and that self-compassion. And it's certainly been that whole journey, and the analogy I use is around the ambulance. So I'm used to kind of trying to carry everything for everybody, trying to look
Mm.
after everyone. And in reality, even the ambulance needs maintenance. If you
Yeah,
don't maintain the ambulance, it can't be there for everybody else. So,
exactly.
you still need to service it. You still need to
Yeah,
look after the ambulance. So it is that self-compassion that is more and more the conversation that I've been having with myself, and kind of going, okay, am I actually taking care of myself? Am I looking after myself?
mm,
Am I just doing this to please people, or is
yeah.
this actually, where I need to be and what I need to be doing for me?
Okay. So are those conversations with yourself actually being action now, or do you still go through that process on a regular basis that in, I need to do this, and then have that conversation again?
I think sometimes I agree to stuff,
Uh-huh.
and go, yeah, 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 of course, and then I'll step back after it and go, have I just agreed to that because I didn't want to let that person down?
Yeah.
I didn't want to
Okay.
upset them.
Mm,
And actually, I need to go back and reassess that, and maybe go back to that person and say, actually, do you know, on processing what you're asking of me,
mm,
I need to either decline, or I need to set some boundaries around
yeah.
that, in order to protect my nervous system, my mental health, etc.
And your well-being. Thank you.
Yeah,
Um, James, thank you so much for your time today. 30 minutes has just gone like that.
it
It's
has
amazing
flown
how
by.
fast
It
it
really,
goes.
really has.
But I'd just like to thank you for the time that you've given today. It's really appreciated. You've let us know a bit more about who you are and how you work with your clients. And if listeners and viewers want to get in contact with you, how would they go about doing that?
So probably the easiest way is just to drop me an email.
Okay,
It's a bit of a long email address, but I'm sure we can get it up on the screen, in edit. So my email address is james.hudson@drivedevelopment.co.uk.
that's not a mouthful at all. But I will make sure that everyone gets to see it and put the information to anyone that's listening within the description. As for today's Becoming the Leader in You podcast, again, James, thank you so much. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. And please don't forget to, as ever, like, subscribe, share so that you don't miss any episodes. From me, keep growing, keep leading, but most importantly, become the leader in you. I've been Jay Acharya, and my guest today has been James Hudson. Thank you, James.
Thank you so much, Jay. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Likewise.